The Awakening. The crystalline spires of New Genesis Station pierced the eternal night of space, their surfaces reflecting the light of distant stars like frozen lightning. Admiral James Harrison stood at the observation deck of the Galactic Council's headquarters, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. After 30 years of service to the Council, he had earned his position as humanity's highest-ranking representative, but the weight of command had never felt heavier than it did today. The message on his secure terminal had been brief but unmistakable. Code 7. The highest level of classified information, reserved for matters that could reshape the galaxy itself. Harrison's jaw tightened as he remembered the contents, carefully worded reports, surveillance footage, and transmission logs that painted a picture so disturbing he had spent the last 3 hours trying to convince himself it wasn't real. The Galactic Council, humanity's supposed partners in advancement and peace, had been systematically preparing for Earth's permanent quarantine. They called it the Preservation Protocol, an initiative designed to contain what they perceived as humanity's dangerous potential for rapid advancement and unpredictable evolution. A soft chime announced the arrival of First Sentinel Kira Vash, her scaled features catching the starlight as she approached. The Centaurian was one of the few alien officials Harrison had come to trust over the years, her species' reputation for absolute honesty making her an invaluable ally in the labyrinth of galactic politics. "The Council is convening in 10 minutes, Admiral," she said, her multi-toned voice carrying a note of concern. "They're voting on the final phase of the Preservation Initiative." Harrison nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "Thank you, First Sentinel. I'll be there shortly." As Kira departed, Harrison's mind raced through the implications. The Council had spent decades integrating human worlds into their federation, all while laying the groundwork for humanity's eventual containment. The quantum barrier technology they'd so generously shared for planetary defense. Designed to be reversed, creating an impenetrable prison around Earth and its colonies. The strategic positioning of peacekeeping fleets. Carefully placed to cut off key supply lines and trade routes at a moment's notice. Harrison's tablet buzzed with another encrypted message. This one from Commander Regina Torres, his chief of intelligence and one of the few humans he trusted with his suspicions. The data stream confirmed his worst fears, the Council was accelerating their timeline. They had noticed humanity's rapid adaptation to their technology, the way human scientists were beginning to push boundaries the Council had deemed immutable. Making his way to the Council chambers, Harrison passed through security checkpoints manned by both organic and artificial sentinels. Each scan and verification felt like another link in an invisible chain, one that had been quietly wrapping around humanity for years. The grand doors of the chamber parted, revealing the circular arena where the fate of species was decided. The Council members sat in their elevated positions, representatives from the 12 founding races of the Galactic Federation. Their bioluminescent markings and elaborate ceremonial attire created a spectacle of light and color, a display of unity that Harrison now saw as nothing more than carefully crafted theater. "Admiral Harrison," High Counselor Zextal's voice resonated through the chamber, his crystalline form catching and refracting light in complex patterns. "We welcome humanity's representative to this historic session." Harrison took his position at the speaker's podium, acutely aware of the hidden surveillance systems analyzing his every movement, every micro-expression. The Council had mastered the art of observation over millennia of existence, but they had never truly understood what they were watching. As the session began, Harrison maintained his facade of diplomatic engagement while his encrypted neural implant continued processing Commander Torres's data stream. The Council's containment plan was comprehensive, but it had one critical flaw: they had underestimated humanity's capacity for adaptation and resilience. Unknown to the Council, Harrison had spent the last year building a network of allies both human and alien who recognized the danger of unchecked Council authority. Kira Vash was just one of many who had seen the pattern of control extending beyond humanity to affect all younger species in the Federation. The Council's presentation continued, each member adding their voice to the chorus of concern about humanity's unprecedented rate of development and the need for protective measures. Harrison listened, noting each carefully chosen phrase that masked their true intentions. They spoke of preservation while planning imprisonment, of protection while preparing chains. As the session drew to a close, Harrison rose to deliver humanity's response to the Council's proposals. In that moment, standing before the assembled power of the galaxy's oldest civilization, he made his choice. The words he spoke were diplomatic and measured, but in his mind, the first shots of resistance had already been fired. The game would continue, but the rules had changed. Humanity would not go quietly into the cage the Council had built. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for every species that had ever faced the Council's version of preservation. As Harrison left the chamber that day, his step was purposeful, his mind already calculating the moves ahead. The Council had spent centuries perfecting their system of control, but they had never faced anything quite like humanity. And in Admiral James Harrison, they were about to meet their match. Seeds of resistance. In the shadowed depths of New Genesis Station's lower levels, Admiral Harrison moved through maintenance corridors that hadn't seen organic traffic in decades. The automated systems paid no attention to his presence, a blind spot carefully crafted by Commander Torres's tech team. The meeting place ahead was officially marked as a defunct recycling node, but it had become something far more valuable, a dead zone in the Council's omnipresent surveillance network. Inside, First Sentinel Kira Vash waited with Director Marcus Wells, the head of Human Colonial Development. Wells's usually pristine uniform was wrinkled, his face drawn with exhaustion after 3 days of analyzing the data Harrison had shared. "The numbers don't lie," Wells said without preamble, his voice tight. "The Council's been systematically positioning their fleets around every major human settlement for the past 5 years. They've got enough firepower to lock down our entire sphere of influence within hours." Kira's scaled features shifted in what Harrison had learned was an expression of deep concern. "The preservation protocol isn't just about humanity," she added, her multiple voices harmonizing in distress. "I've found similar patterns in the Council's dealings with the Arcturus Collective and the Vega Consortium. Any species showing rapid technological advancement gets marked for preservation." Harrison absorbed this information, adding it to the complex web of intelligence he'd been weaving. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore," he said. "We're fighting for every species that's ever been tagged for containment." The Admiral activated a holographic display, showing the current disposition of Council forces across the galaxy. Dozens of lights pulsed in strategic positions around human space, each representing a fleet capable of enforcing the Council's will. But Harrison's attention was focused on the darker areas between these points of light. "The Council's strategy relies on overwhelming force and perfect coordination," he explained. "But they've created gaps, blind spots they don't think anyone would dare to exploit." Wells leaned forward, studying the map. "Those gaps aren't accidents. The Council's too methodical for that." "Exactly," Harrison agreed. "They're traps. The Council expects any resistance to follow predictable patterns of rebellion. They're prepared for direct confrontation, for desperate attempts to break their cordons. What they're not prepared for is patience." Over the next hour, Harrison laid out his plan. It wasn't the kind of strategy that would appeal to traditional military minds. There were no decisive battles, no dramatic confrontations. Instead, it was a plan of subtle manipulation and careful positioning. Using his position within the Council, Harrison would continue to play the role of humanity's compliant representative while secretly building a network of allies across species and sectors. Kira's connections among the Centaurians would be crucial, as would Wells's influence over the colonial development programs. "We need to move people and resources without raising alarms," Harrison explained. "Every colony ship, every trade vessel becomes part of our shadow fleet. We build our strength in plain sight, masked as routine commercial activity." The plan was audacious in its subtlety. While the Council watched for signs of military buildup, Harrison's network would create a distributed resistance, spreading resources and personnel across thousands of seemingly unrelated locations. Each piece would appear innocent in isolation, but together they would form a hidden army. Kira's scales rippled with understanding. The Council's greatest weakness is their certainty, she said. They believe they know how lesser species think, how we'll react. They never consider that we might learn to think differently. Wells nodded slowly, his initial skepticism giving way to cautious optimism. How long do we have? Based on the Council's current timeline. 6 months, maybe 8 before they begin implementing the final phase of the preservation protocol. Harrison's expression hardened. But we're not working on their schedule anymore. The meeting concluded with careful assignments of tasks and resources. As they prepared to leave, Kira paused. The Council has spent millennia perfecting their control over younger species, she said. What makes you think humanity can succeed where others have failed? Harrison's reply was immediate. Because we're not trying to beat them at their own game. We're changing the rules entirely. He smiled slightly. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our military might, it's our ability to adapt, to see possibilities where others see only obstacles. Over the next weeks, Harrison's plan began to take shape. Colonial development projects expanded slightly beyond their original scope, each one concealing carefully chosen personnel and resources. Trade routes shifted subtly, creating new patterns of movement that would serve as evacuation corridors when needed. Military exercises tested the limits of Council oversight while gathering crucial intelligence about response patterns. Each day, Harrison attended Council sessions, participating in discussions about humanities, concerning development rate, with carefully measured concern. He watched as the Council's plans progressed, noting every assumption they made about human behavior and capability. Each misconception was another weapon in his arsenal. Commander Torres's intelligence network grew, spreading through the ranks of other species' military and civilian hierarchies. They found others who had seen the pattern of Council control and recognized its dangers. The Arcturus Collective, the Vega Consortium, even elements of the older species began to quietly align themselves with Harrison's vision. But the Council was not blind. Questions began to arise about certain discrepancies in colonial development reports, about unusual patterns in trade manifests. Harrison knew they were watching him more closely now, looking for signs of the very rebellion they had predetermined humanity would attempt. Let them watch, he thought. Let them search for the resistance they expected to find. They would see nothing but a dutiful admiral managing humanity's integration into galactic society. The real resistance was growing in the spaces between their certainties, in the shadows cast by their own assumptions. As Harrison stood once again before the Council, delivering another carefully crafted report on human activities, he felt the weight of the galaxy's future in every word. The Council saw a loyal servant of their system. They had no way of knowing that every session, every report, every seemingly routine interaction was another seed of their eventual downfall being planted right before their eyes. The breaking storm. The first sign that the Council had discovered Harrison's network came not with alarms or accusations, but with silence. The usual background chatter of administrative communications fell quiet, creating a void that spoke volumes to those who knew how to listen. Harrison stood in his private quarters aboard the new Genesis station, watching as emergency protocols activated across human space, disguised as routine system updates. Commander Torres's face flickered on his secure display, her expression grim. They've begun moving their containment fleets into position, Admiral. 17 major colony worlds are already surrounded. The Council's trying to be subtle about it, but they're not hiding anymore. Harrison nodded, his calm exterior masking the intense calculations running through his mind. How many of our people made it out before the cordons went up? 83% of critical personnel, sir. The Shadow Fleet is assembled and waiting at the designated points. Director Wells has our civilian evacuation protocols ready to implement. She paused, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. Sir, if we don't move soon. I know, Regina. Harrison's voice was steady. Send the signal. Operation Twilight begins now. Across human space, carefully placed agents began executing their long-prepared roles. Colonial defense systems, supposedly configured to Council specifications, revealed hidden capabilities that turned their containment fields against the Council's own ships. Trade vessels transformed into combat units, years of concealed modifications allowing them to outmaneuver the Council's superior technology. First Sentinel Kira Vash's contribution proved invaluable. The Centaurian encryption protocol she had provided allowed Harrison's forces to communicate freely while the Council's supposedly unbreakable network dissolved into chaos. The Council had never imagined that one of their own founding races would turn against them. In the Council chamber, Harrison faced the assembled representatives of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. The usual bioluminescent displays were dimmed, creating an atmosphere of tension and accusation. High Counselor Zextal's crystalline form pulsed with barely contained fury. "You stand accused of the highest treason, Admiral Harrison. Not just against the Council, but against the very order of galactic civilization. How do you answer these charges?" Harrison's response was measured, each word chosen with precise care. "I stand accused of protecting my species from imprisonment. Of defending the right of humanity and all younger races to determine their own path of development." He stepped forward, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "The real question, High Counselor, is how do you answer for millennia of suppression disguised as protection?" The chamber erupted into chaos as hidden data streams activated, broadcasting proof of the Council's systematic program of species containment to every connected system in the galaxy. Centuries of carefully hidden records, each documenting the Council's preservation of promising young civilizations, laid bare for all to see. "You believe you've outsmarted us," Zextal's voice cut through the tumult. "But you've only proven why humanity must be contained. Your kind is too unpredictable, too dangerous to be allowed free rein in the galaxy." Harrison watched as Council security forces began flooding into the chamber, their weapons charged. But he wasn't worried. Everything was proceeding according to plan. "The time for containing species is over," Harrison declared. "Your greatest mistake wasn't underestimating humanity's capabilities. It was failing to understand that evolution, change, and growth are not threats to be controlled, they're the very essence of life itself." As if in response to his words, the station's lighting flickered. Council members looked around in confusion as their personal security fields wavered. Harrison's neural implant registered the success of Commander Torres's cyber warfare team. The Council's own defense systems were being turned against them, just as they had planned to turn humanity's defenses into a prison. "What have you done?" Zextal demanded, his crystalline form resonating with alarm. "Created a choice," Harrison answered. "Right now, across the galaxy, every species marked for preservation is breaking free of their constraints. The Arcturus Collective, the Vega Consortium, even portions of your own member races are rejecting the Council's control. You can adapt to a new reality where all species have the right to self-determination, or you can face the combined resistance of every civilization you've tried to suppress." The chamber's grand doors burst open as Kira Vash entered, leading a contingent of both Centaurian and human forces. The Council members found themselves surrounded, their millennia of absolute authority crumbling before their eyes. "This is the moment the Council has always feared," Harrison continued. "Not because of the threat we pose, but because it forces you to confront the truth. Your system of control wasn't preserving civilization, it was stagnating it." Beyond the chamber's walls, battles were erupting across dozens of star systems. But these weren't the desperate, doomed rebellions the Council had prepared for. Harrison's Shadow Fleet, combined with forces from other liberated species, was executing precisely coordinated strikes that targeted the very foundations of Council power. The groundwork laid over months of careful preparation was paying off. Council commanders found their supposedly loyal forces divided, their tactical advantages nullified by intimate knowledge of their procedures and weaknesses. The rebellion Harrison had built wasn't just fighting the Council, it was dismantling their ability to fight back. As alarms blared through New Genesis Station, Harrison faced the Council one last time. You sought to preserve the galaxy in amber, to control the course of evolution itself. But life cannot be contained. It adapts, it grows, it finds a way forward. That's not humanity's unique trait, it's the fundamental nature of existence itself. The breaking storm had begun, and with it, the galaxy would never be the same. Rising tide. The battle for New Genesis Station had been merely the opening move in a much larger game. As Harrison's flagship, the Defiant, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Arcturus sector, the true scale of the conflict became apparent. The void was alive with weapons fire, the darkness punctuated by the death throes of ships both Council and Rebel. From her position at Tactical, Commander Torres delivered her report with characteristic precision. The Arcturus Defense Fleet has successfully broken through the Council's containment grid. Their quantum physicists have already adapted our barrier reversal protocols to their systems. 47 colony worlds are now free of Council control. Harrison studied the tactical display, watching as centuries of carefully maintained order dissolved into creative chaos. The Council's response to the rebellion had been predictable: massive fleet deployments, attempts to isolate and contain the uprising. But they were fighting yesterday's war, unable to adapt to the fluid, ever-changing strategies of the combined resistance. Status of the Vega Consortium? Harrison asked, his eyes never leaving the display. Better than expected, Torres replied. Their biotech specialists have found ways to disrupt the Council's neural command networks. Council ships are losing coordination faster than they can adapt. The Resistance's greatest advantage wasn't firepower or numbers, it was diversity. Each species brought unique perspectives and capabilities to the fight. The Council's standardized tactics, so effective against individual rebellions, faltered in the face of multiple species working in concert, each approaching problems from different angles. A priority signal cut through the tactical chatter. Director Wells's hologram materialized on the bridge, his expression urgent. Admiral, we have a situation at the Helios Research Station. The Council's launched a direct assault. They're after the quantum integration protocols. Harrison's jaw tightened. Helios Station represented one of humanity's greatest achievements, the successful merger of multiple species technologies into something entirely new. If the Council captured those protocols, they could find ways to counter the Resistance's technological advantages. Send word to our Centaurian allies, Harrison ordered. We'll need their phase shift technology for what I have in mind. The next hours were a blur of coordinated chaos. The Defiant led a battle group composed of ships from 6 different species, each bringing unique capabilities to the fight. Council commanders found their carefully planned attacks disrupted by strategies they'd never encountered, tactics that shouldn't have been possible according to their understanding of physics and technology. Kira Vash's voice came through the command channel, her multitonal speech carrying notes of both concern and excitement. Harrison, the Council's bringing in their Titan-class battleships. They're burning out their own crews to push through our lines. This was the moment Harrison had been waiting for. All ships, execute Protocol Omega. Let's show them what true integration looks like. What followed would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. The Resistance fleet didn't just coordinate, it merged. Centaurian phase shift fields linked with human quantum barriers. Vegan biotech interfaced with Arcturian energy matrices. The result was a defensive network that adapted and evolved in real time, turning the Council's own power against them. The Titan-class ships, symbols of the Council's technological superiority, found themselves trapped in a web of overlapping fields and forces that their builders had never imagined possible. Their crews, trained to execute perfect but rigid battle plans, couldn't adapt fast enough to counter strategies that changed from moment to moment. But victory came at a cost. The Defiance bridge shuddered as another Council barrage found its mark. Damage reports flooded in, each one a reminder of the lives being lost on both sides of the conflict. Admiral, Torres called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. We're detecting massive power buildups in the Council vessels. They're attempting a synchronized quantum burst. If they succeed..." Harrison understood the implications. The Council would rather destroy everything than lose control. It was the ultimate expression of their philosophy: if they couldn't preserve the galaxy their way, they would preserve it in death. "All ships, emergency protocol Sigma." Harrison's command rang through the fleet. "Divert all power to the integrated shields. We're not just fighting for freedom now, we're fighting for survival itself." What followed was a testament to everything Harrison had worked to build. Ships from dozens of species, crews who until recently had been strangers or even enemies, working in perfect harmony. The integrated shield network expanded, strengthened by the combined will and technology of multiple civilizations. When the Council ships released their quantum burst, they expected it to tear reality itself apart. Instead, they watched in disbelief as their weapon was caught, contained, and redirected by defenses that shouldn't have been possible. The battle for Helio Station marked a turning point. The Council's most powerful weapons had failed, not against superior firepower, but against the very thing they had tried to prevent: the combined creativity and adaptability of multiple species working together. As the Council fleet retreated in disarray, Harrison stood on his damaged bridge, watching the tactical displays tell the story of victory. But he knew this was just one battle in a larger war. The Council's hold on the galaxy was weakening, but they wouldn't go quietly. "Send word to all resistance cells," he ordered. "The Council will be desperate now. They'll fall back on their oldest protocols, try to reassert control through any means necessary. We need to be ready." The stars seemed to shine brighter through the Defiance viewports, as if the galaxy itself was awakening to new possibilities. The age of preservation was ending. The age of evolution had begun. Dawn's promise. The Council's last stand would take place where their power had first been established, in the ancient system of Primordus, around a star so old it had witnessed the birth of galactic civilization. The Defiance sensors revealed a sight that made even the most seasoned crew members pause: nearly 1,000 Council warships arranged in a defensive formation that transformed space itself into a geometric work of art. Admiral Harrison stood at his command station, the weight of countless lives resting on his next decisions. The combined resistance fleet had assembled behind him, vessels of every size and design, representing species that had spent centuries under Council control. Their differences were now their greatest strength. Multiple quantum signatures detected, Commander Torres reported, her voice steady despite the tension. "They've activated something in the Primordus star itself. Energy readings are off any scale we've ever encountered." The Founder's cache, Kira Vasha's voice came through the command channel, her multiple tones resonating with ancient knowledge. "The Council's earliest weapons, preserved for a moment of ultimate necessity. They mean to reset the galaxy rather than lose control of it." Harrison had expected something like this. The Council's philosophy of preservation taken to its logical extreme: if they couldn't maintain order, they would freeze everything in time, turning the galaxy into a perfect, unchanging monument to their vision. "All ships, initiate Protocol Unity," Harrison commanded. Just as we practiced. What followed was unprecedented in galactic history.